And you know, to make matters worse, for Naomi, it was her husband and their 2 sons. You know, death deprives us of our loved ones. And grief consumes us and robs us of joy. And I remember some years ago, when I lost my sister Angela at just 33 years old. You know, I remember my world was shattered and I felt like, you know what, why don't you just go ahead and bury me too? You know? It's the hardest thing that you can ever go through. You know, it's a hard thing as a member, I think, going to church and grieving, but as a minister, and you're preaching, and you're singing, and I remember I went back to church the one week, and we were singing a hymn, and I couldn't sing. Couldn't sing. And I thought, Lord Jesus, how can I minister and I can't even sing? I just lost all joy. Grief will do that to you. You know, and I praise God for the wonderful promises that He gives us. But I remember, you know, we had the funeral service and I was over by my mom's, and I'm naturally a jogger. That's the exercise I love to do. And I remember getting up in the morning and I put on my sports outfit, my trainers on, and I thought, I'm going to go for a jog today. And you know, I jogged and I felt like I never wanted to stop jogging, you know? Just wanted something to take the pain away. And you know, I praise God for beautiful memories. Because in the end, it's those wonderful memories together with the promises that God gives that helps you to come through. And it wasn't long before, once again, I was able to sing and I was able to preach. And I was able to say, you know what, God, I know you've got a great plan. But grief can really turn your world upside down. You know, and so these ladies were there, consumed by grief. And, you know, it's against this backdrop that we receive one of the most beautiful love stories ever told. And we're going to go through this, look through this story to see what we can learn from them. And the title of the sermon is Dating God's Way. Could you say that for me, please? Dating God's Way. Right? Because the reality is there are many ways in which you can date. Yes? Many ways in which you can date. But, you know, God makes it plain that there's a way that He would like to bless us as we date. And that's a way that we would really like to share with you. And it's one that we've been sharing with you through the Smart Love. Okay? And so we're going to follow through this. So if you have your Bibles, turn with me please to Ruth chapter 1. And I'm going to read verses 8 to 13. And this is what it says. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. And may the Lord show you kindness. You have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant you each, that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." Huh? What do you pick up there? Naomi was an unselfish woman. You know, she could have thought to herself, "I've lost my 2 sons. Well, you know what? God has blessed me with 2 daughters. I'll take them with me." But instead, she's so selfless that she says, "Listen, go back to your families. You know, it could be that you meet other young men and you could be happily married." What a selfless woman. there and she's trying to say to them, listen, return home, start over again, and know that God will bless you. The reality is that Naomi and Elimelech, her husband, Kilion and Mahlon, had left from their home and gone across to Moab so that they could find food because it was famine. And when they had gone across there, the young men found wives and were married. But within the space of 10 years, all 3 men in Naomi's life passed away. And so she's looking at her daughter-in-laws and saying, well, you know what, this is a chapter of my life that's really over now. It's over and done with. I'm going to go home and see what I can make of my life. And, she looks at her daughters-in-law and says, I think it's best that you go and start over as well. Let's all just go and start over. Let's see what happens. Well, the reality is that Orpah returns. But this is what Ruth has to say in verses 16 to 18. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. And so we have here the 2 ladies decided to make their way back home. Now Ruth was a Moabite, and the Bible reveals that they were an idolatrous people. They worshipped the god Chemosh, referred to in Numbers chapter 21 verse 29, and also 1 Kings 11 verses 7 and 33. The Moabites were hostile to Israel, and they tracked their lineage back to Abraham, in fact to his nephew Lot, and the incestuous relationship that he had with his daughters. And Deuteronomy stated that the Moabites, Deuteronomy chapter 23 verses 3 to 6, stated that the Moabites were to be excluded from the assembly, from the congregation of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. So I think we get the feeling that the Israelites and the Moabites didn't tend to get on. But here stands Ruth, a Moabite, refusing to return back to her families to worship, the worship of false gods. Instead, she's determined to remain with her mother-in-law, Naomi. And so the 2 ladies make their way back home. Well, by the time they make it back home, they cause quite a stir. In verses 19 to verse 22, this is what it says. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me, and the Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned home from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law. Arriving in Bethlehem at the barley harvest was beginning. Right? Don't call me Naomi. Naomi, which means pleasant and sweet. Instead, she thought, well, that name doesn't actually fit me right now. It doesn't quite express my circumstances. Call me Mara, bitter, because that's how I feel right now, But nevertheless, you kind of get a feeling that there was a little bit of excitement that was taking place at their arrival back in Bethlehem. Yeah? They were backing Judah, and the question was, what was going to happen now? Right. So chapter 2, verse 1. Ruth chapter 2, verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So we're informed about a man named Boaz. Right? And notice what Ruth does here. Now I want you to take very careful attention now. Verses 2 and 3. Notice very carefully what Ruth is about to do. Verses 2 and 3. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone whose eyes I find favor. Naomi said to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out, entered the field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. So what do we notice about Ruth? What do you notice about Ruth? She's returned home with Naomi, and what do you make of her action, what she's just done? What do you make of it? What does she do? Anyone? What does Ruth do? She's going to provide food. Thank you. So she's not contented. Now she could have come home, and I want you to think about yourselves, especially young people. If you come into a strange person, a strange place, what is the first thing you would want to do? Maybe you would like to socialize. Like to get to know some of the people there, some of the young people, and think, well, you know what, what's your name? You know, find out what the young people are like, do some socializing. But the first thing that Ruth does is to go and work. Okay? That's very, very important that we notice this. Ruth was determined to take care of her mother-in-law and herself. There was no one else to go out to work, and so Ruth said, you know what, I'm going out, I'm going to go and work so that we can live. Right? So that's one of the first things that we notice about Ruth. Right? And you know, according to the laws, in Leviticus 19, verse 9 and 10, God instructs the people, when you're harvesting, do not reap to the very edge. Make sure that you provide for those who are poor, so that they can come and they can, glean some of the harvest and they can be fed. And so Ruth was able to go and benefit from these laws and go and gather crops. And it so happened that God enabled her to go where? Where did she go to gather the crops? Whose field was she in? Boaz's field. Okay? Right? So this is where the story starts to get very, very interesting. Right? The thing is here that you may not go out looking for someone. Is that true? You may just be carrying on with your ordinary life, everyday life, going to work, going to college, going and doing what you normally do. Not looking for anyone to say, I'd like to find someone that I'm going to date. You might not be looking for anyone. There's no indication in this story that Ruth woke up that morning and thought, I need to get married. I wonder who I could marry today. There's no indication at all in the story that Ruth went out that morning looking to find someone to date. But we do pick up that Ruth went out that morning to go and gather food so that she might provide for her needs and the needs of her mother-in-law. What is the point that we're making here? Well, take your little handouts in hand. Yes? The point is that sometimes you don't go looking for love, but love finds you. Yes? And sometimes you're just going about your ordinary everyday business when all of a sudden you cross paths with someone that you end up marrying. Yes? And so what would we call step one? Step one, we would say, trust the providence of God. Yeah? You can write that in. Step one, trust the providence of God. Sometimes you didn't go looking, but somehow God had a plan. Okay? Right? And for Ruth, that's very much evidence. Right? That she ended up working in Boaz's field was not simply a coincidence. Okay? Now remember, youth, when I was at Newbold College, I'd been at Newbold College for a number of years. And I was, just minding my own business. It wasn't that I dated to date someone, but I came to an end and I thought, well, you know what, with this whole dating thing, I think I want to stay single for the rest of my life. It was like a decision that I'd made. And I thought, yeah, I don't think there's much out there. But on this particular day, now I've been at Newbold and I was doing my BA, and I finished my BA. And I thought, so I had this whole registration time down to a fine art. Now, I would have it that I would be like one of the first individuals to register for my classes, so that I'd have the whole day left to myself. So the queues, when I finished registration, the queues were just starting to form, And so I kind of prided myself on that. I'd get out early as I could to go and get registered. And this particular day, I was serving as a dean at Newbold, and I prided myself on having one of the best rooms in the facility. I was upstairs in Spoil House. I could see across to the library. I could see across to Murdoch Hall. I could just see right across the lawn, and it was just beautiful. So this particular morning, I had my worship, and everything was just so nice. And for some reason, I thought, you know what? You better hurry up and beat the mad crowd. You don't want to, the queues to start forming. So I thought, yeah, let me go. And for some reason, I just thought, let me look through the window. And be careful about this, looking through the window. I thought, let me just look through the window to see if many people have started to come on site. And on this particular day, the sun was rising, the dew was on the grass.